Hi, and welcome to the 6th episode of Cycle's podcast. I'm Jake Warner, Cycle's CEO and founder. This is Chris Aubuchon, our Director of Customer Success, and today we have Brandon Gottier from BDG Web Design. I guess to start off, it'd be awesome to hear what BDG is, what kind of projects you work on, and diving right in.
Sure. So BDG is my company. I started when I was in college. Was always really curious in why web stuff worked. Pop the hood, see how things work. Started out as a hobby and then kind of slowly took over my life. I was working at a hospital right out of college, doing a lot of systems integration stuff, and eventually left there to do BDG full time. About be 9 years or so, November. Since then, we've grown to a team of 5 now. We like to focus on real custom web solutions, web and mobile apps particularly. We kind of saw the writing on the wall about 5 years ago when everybody can go build their own websites. Everybody has a cousin who does a simple WordPress site. There's a lot of inexpensive ways to get up and started. And we really found that custom solutions really drive us, finding out issues for businesses in particular, and then scoping and building a particular project for that to create these efficiencies for these businesses. That really got us going and really it's fulfilling.
And so with the custom development projects that you do, is there any specific niche that you kind of found your sweet spot in?
There's there's a few of them. Scheduling is always a big one. Anytime you're talking about getting 2 different parties in a particular place at a specific time, that's always a challenge. So we've built some custom scheduling apps for people. A lot of different things that have different user roles where you have admins and general users and managers. Those kind of things have really been kind of our bread and butter too.
Got it. And from previous conversations, our conversations, we already know that you do both mobile and web. Can you dive into that in how much of the projects that you work on are mobile, how many are web, how many are hybrid of both of those?
Sure.
It'd be great to hear about some of the tech stacks that you've decided that you've opted to use as part of those.
Sure. So we've built 29 mobile apps. We have 6 more in the pipeline now. Of those 29, about 2 of them were mobile only. The majority of the other ones have a mobile-facing app for the end users, and then web dashboards for admins or other user roles. A good example of that is we actually have a company that's out in Nebraska that has they do electrical work on pivots for the fields, and their techs are out in the field all the time, so their techs are using the mobile app to troubleshoot and enter parts and time, and then there's admins that have the web dashboard to approve the work and integrates with QuickBooks and all that stuff too. As far as our tech stack goes, PHP, MySQL for server stuff. We're using a lot of Linux setup, and then for the end user, we use a combination of Angular and/or React based on the need or the requirement of the project.
Excellent. And so I remember back in 2018, so Brandon was one of the first clients that we'd ever brought on to Cycle, back when, I don't even know if Cycle was publicly not live yet.
Yeah, you were showing me back end.
And I remember during our first meeting, we were doing some sort of test deployment, or we were just in that early phase of seeing what we could get online. And I believe we had something crash right in the middle.
We did.
It's crazy how much has changed with the platform in the, 3.5 years or so since then. But yeah, so I remember during that same meeting, we were talking about containers and just the adoption of containers and the value that they can bring in. So since that meeting, how have containers impacted how you've built the projects at BDG and have I guess simply that?
Yeah, so containers, like you said, you guys have come so far. Every time I log in, I feel like there's, oh, look at this new thing, or Chris is like, hey, this is coming soon. Make sure you check this out. Containers have really helped us kind of change mentalities about infrastructure. Before, we would have a server that ran several projects, and you would tweak something and something would break, and all these different things that would go on.
You try to maintain PHP across all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's go 7.3, and then everything breaks. So containers really help you get that specific stack real quickly, just quicker deployment, and then you guys from a support standpoint. There's been times I'm like, hey, I need this, and I've never had that experience. Like, okay, we're on it. Like both of you at the same time, we're on it, which is pretty incredible.
Same keyboard.
Probably. Yeah. You guys are sharing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really helped us. It helps us plan a little better too. We know the cost. We know how it works. So that's.
And so walk me through your pre-cycle days of how you were managing infrastructure at that point. I don't know if we've actually even ever had this conversation.
Yeah.
I know that we had talked about transitioning to cycle, but what did things look like before cycle?
So we used a lot of shared servers that would run multiple websites at the same time. Then we kind of moved on to virtual servers that you can still run multiple sites at the same time. We still have some instances of that where there are simpler projects that don't require a whole lot. But we would have 5 or 6 of these virtual servers with a handful of projects throughout that you'd have to like, okay, that one's on this server and that one's on this server and that one has this setting and that one has this setting, and it gets pretty tangled pretty quickly.
Was that back, were you using cPanel or Plusk back then?
Yeah, we're using cPanel and WHM is typically what we use for those.
Got it. And so moving from that into now using Cycle. So one of the things that with Cycle, we don't have SSH built into at least being able to connect to the node, right? You can connect to your instances, but you can't connect to the server. Have you had any pains or how has that impacted you? Because it's something that when, I guess some context here is when we have new companies talking to us, the first thing those companies usually ask us, how can I connect directly to the server? And when we say, well...
Pretty sure I asked you the same question. Yep.
I think you did.
100% did.
And very quickly it transitions into the concept or into the conversation around you shouldn't need to. The whole goal of Cycle is that we're managing these hosts for you. You can still deploy whatever technologies you want on top of them. You can still use containers, obviously, et cetera. But you should never need to SSH into that actual server itself. Can you speak to your experience of that within BDG? Is that something that you found yourself missing at all, or is it something that after that kind of initial step, you realize that there was no need for it?
It's exactly right. It was kind of a light bulb. It was like, oh wait, you don't need it if you do this, right? Because we were used to doing everything, go, and it's just so easy. You don't need it.
No, and it's good to hear because it's just again one of those adoption things that when we've tried to take a bit of a different approach with building Cycle, and I think initially a lot of people are hesitant when we say, well, do not SSH access to the nodes, but it is because of that allows us to push out these updates.
Sometimes, so there's 2 reactions. There's, oh, maybe I don't need it, your reaction, and then there's the person that's somewhat panicking that they might not have it, and then you show them the two-way console, and then they'll kind of feel at ease. It's like, oh, you still have access to do administration tasks on this process, in this container. It's just you're not SSHing onto the server. So those are the two reactions I've observed, and one of them is a little bit panicked at first.
I think I had both of those reactions.
They see that demo.
I think I did both of those.
I'm sure because in 2018 we didn't have the two-way console.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think
I think we had because that was pre-pack.
I think you guys had it for you. I think you guys had access, but the customers didn't.
Yeah, well, we had output of the container, but we didn't have the two-way
exactly.
console yet.
Yep. Because that was a huge one when we released that, and everyone was like, "Whoa, that is really neat."
Even to today, the two-way console is my favorite feature in Cycle. I love the fact that with the two-way console, you're able to SSH into those containers, right? But we did not open any ports. We did not. You have to deal with copying SSH keys or managing passwords. It's my favorite feature. It's so simple, right?
I love when you smile when you talk about Cycle.
I love it. It's so simple.
You get this look on your face like it's the best thing ever.
Well, it's neat because we've demoed that feature to people who built Docker and people who are fundamental to Kubernetes, and they're like, why didn't we think of that, right? And so it just feels good. But anyway, jumping back to BDG. So you're talking about the different niches of the products that you're working on, or the products that you've built. Yep. We talked about how you work on both mobile and web, and so you had mentioned that for with the web projects that you're working on, your tech stack right now is mainly PHP. You use MySQL. And what does that look like from a development process in terms of, your developers are writing code, you have an update ready, what happens next? How have you found the process that works best for your team?
Sure. So I'll go mobile app specifically for this one. So mobile apps, you have the back end for the data and all that stuff. Then you have the front end, which you need to submit to both Apple and Android for approval, both of which have their own different timelines. We actually submitted an update yesterday that was approved by Apple in 42 minutes. Never seen that fast before. Usually it's a day and a half, 2 days, but I couldn't believe it. So typically what we do is we get the back end ready, re-image, get it ready, and then as soon as those are approved, you can manually release them at the same time, and then we would re-image our container for the back end. That's specific if we have like an API level change. That is also relative to the front end. Sometimes we do them independently of each other based upon, what the update is. But Cycle gives us that flexibility to do that pretty easily and efficiently.
Have you tested our pipelines functionality yet?
Chris showed it to me a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I've brought it up about 4 or 5 times.
I was
randomly.
like this.
And we finally got to go through and do one.
Yeah, we did build one.
And you were like, "Wow, I've been asking for that for a while."
Yeah, thanks.
And usually, like you
saved
said,
me 3 weeks of my life.
we're pretty fast about things, but that was such a big feature that
it's a big one.
I mean, we spent a lot of time kind of almost philosophizing over the idea of pipelines. And then
they're so flexible too, just the way you guys have it. Like this triggers this triggers that, boom, go down. Like you can go all the way down from I'm pushing a repo to I'm re-imaged.
Yeah.
Have you hooked it into a Git yet?
We did. What did we do?
I don't remember if it was a Docker file. I think it might have been. I think it was a Docker file. So that's the thing. And when I show, I honestly when I show current users the pipeline plus Docker file plus reimage, it's becoming a more of a intense aha moment than two-way console is. So we might have a contender.
From our side, absolutely.
For that top,
for knowing how much time it took for me to go through those steps to know that I can go.
Right. Yeah. And then now with trigger keys and the fact that you can just hook that up into a small script on your local machine, and then all of a sudden your dev environment's updated, or your prod environment if you want to. Push it that way, yeah. If you want to just push straight to prod,
on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, that's the confidence. That should be a T-shirt. We should get those. Cycle, the confidence to push to prod on Friday afternoon.
I like that.
Oh God.
From a dev standpoint,
is that too much text?
No, I'd wear that. Absolutely. Let's co-brand that.
Suddenly, every enterprise company we're talking to is like, goodbye.
Anyways, so without context. That might seem like a lot of random things there. Pipelines specifically are ways to automate steps on Cycle. For more information, we do have a nice write-up in our documentation, or reach out to me on our Slack if you wanted some follow-up information on that. If it sounds really cool, we'd love to dive into it and talk about it.
It's awesome.
But before I derailed that, you had asked a question, and it was about using pipelines, and we had said that you had used the one that we set up. We weren't sure, but the Docker file being the source and abstracting the actual building of the container, I think that part is the part where people are like, wow, that is so fun to not build, push, pull, reimage, compared to what most people have to do, which is using a registry of some kind.
Yep.
Right? And then pushing to the registry, pulling to whatever server they're on, reimaging that container with whatever orchestrator they're using. If it's Cycle, it's much easier.
Comma. Cycle. It's much easier.
So I'm excited to see you use that across, because you have a kind of a growing portfolio of projects on the platform.
Yep, we got a couple coming as well.
That's exciting. Anything? Well, I guess you can't get too deep into it.
Can't tell everything. Yeah, we got a big, good-sized mobile and web app coming up in the next probably 7-8 weeks that we'll be leveraging Cycle for. Yeah.
And jumping back to pipelines for a second,
Okay.
one of the things you mentioned something that got me started to think, it's specifically around Docker Hub, right? So like before you were using pipelines, were you storing everything on Docker Hub and then pulling it over?
Correct.
And so we've had a number of people reach out to us saying that because like I don't know if you've hit the limit yet, but Docker Hub or Docker. Placed limits on Docker Hub, I think earlier this year, where you can have, I don't want to throw out a number because I might be wrong, but I mean, they greatly limited the number of pulls you can pull images you can pull from Docker Hub per day, unless you're paying for it now. And so one of the neat things about having the process that we've set up where you, especially with the pipelines, where you build and then directly that's already stored in Cycle, we've had some companies realize that they didn't need to pay for Docker Hub anymore either, because there was no pulls. It was just everything was just already inherently on the platform. And so as you've been going through your portfolio, is that something that you've encountered yet, where you've hit that cap?
We did. We hit it once. We were kind of sprinting to get something done, and we had a handful of pulls. I forget how many it was too, but yeah, it was like, oh, I guess we're gonna finish this tomorrow.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary. That's impacted so many people. But at the same time, companies that have multiple servers. I mean, I'm not just saying like 1 or 2 servers, but let me take a step back. Not necessarily multiple servers, but if you're using like Docker or Kubernetes or things on multiple servers, suppose you have 100 servers and you say, I want to pull a copy of this image to each of these servers. Each of those servers will perform that pull directly, right? So pulling one image might put you over that cap, right? Where the way that we built Cycle is that it's just everything is pulled into that one data source, and we just distributed it all.
I just realized I haven't told you about this feature yet.
Oh.
It just was released. It's API only. I hope this is already released.
It should be.
It's the ability to pre-tell the servers about the image. In hopes of both having this be super interesting, because I think it is, and me not telling him the wrong information about this, I think that's a kind of a cool addition to what you're talking about now.
Yeah, so one of the neatest things or one of the things that Cycle does that kind of stands apart from, I think, a lot of other platforms is we run what is called the internal API. And I don't know if you actually has used the internal API
Just
yet.
a few times, I think, with you.
But so the internal API is an API that is mounted into containers, right? And so instead of it being like something that you'll write code that'll interact with it publicly, again, a public container, it's actually a Unix socket mounted into your containers. And so you can use that internal API to ask for information about the container itself, to ask for information about the environment. That way you have very rich data, but it's literally the container just using its own, it's literally a Unix socket to ask for that information. But recently we added the ability to have a container, so you can take a container, and soon we'll be able to apply access rules to these containers, right? So you can have a container, you can apply a conductor rule to it, and then the conductor rule is pretty much saying this container is allowed to make changes to the underlying server that it's on. And so it's neat because, and I don't know if any of the projects that you're working on right now would necessarily utilize this feature, but suppose you were building a product that you were constantly needing to scale up and scale down, and you had a number of servers that you were deploying to, but not always would you have a container just ready to go on that server. Like you might have, think of it like auto scaling, right? But using this internal API, you could make a call back to Cycle and say, hey, even though I'm not using this image yet, download it to the server because I'm going to need it at some point. That way, instead of that long start time,
right,
it's just already there. And so the start time for that container should be half a second. And so that's something that, we did add. I don't know if we've put that in even docs yet.
I didn't put it in to the docs because the API was still being updated with that. And then, there's some changes on, as Grady is probably adding now as he crushes through some work back there.
I'm sorry, what? Huh?
But it'll be in docs very soon. And I also need to double check that it's in the changelog. Obviously the feature was released and is being used by some select people that are already implementing it. But as you can think about it, it's like, wow, that's another really flexible, maybe niche, useful tool that's available, and it's pretty easy to implement, right? So
That's
just
a pretty good reduction in start
for,
time.
Yeah.
I've seen it a couple times where it takes a dozen or so seconds and then reduce it down to half a second. That's a pretty good reduction.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you have a product that you have a container, and during certain workloads you need to scale to 1,000 copies of it, right? That's where it can be incredibly valuable. But another feature that will be out by the time this podcast is out will be environment secrets. Have you filled Brandon on environment secrets yet?
I haven't been talking about environment.
I just came on the podcast so I can get more information about what's coming out of the cycle. That's why I'm here.
We'll jump back to BDG in a second, but we've gotten on a new feature.
I'm good with this. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about environment secrets?
I can.
Yeah, I think that as the architect, you are probably slightly more qualified.
So like right now you have container environment variables, right?
Yep.
And so one of the features that we've had a number of clients ask for is the ability to implement secrets. And so secrets are like environment variables, except when you're in the portal, you can no longer see the secrets, right? So it's like, hey, I have these environment variables. This is my SQL database password, right? And I don't want, if I hire other developers to work on a project, I don't want them to be able to see. I want them to know that environment variable is there, but I don't want them to be able to see what the actual underlying secret is, right? Because I don't want them to copy that and run off with it. And so we are releasing this feature called, well, technically it's not even called environment secrets, it's called environment variables. But environment variables is, it's a little confusing. We might have to end up renaming it, because like we have environment variables that are obviously the variables that you specify to a container, but now we're also releasing like environment scoped variables, where suppose you had 4 or 5 different containers in that same environment that all needed to know what one variable was, right? And so instead of you having to, like, suppose you had like a debug mode for your containers and you wanted to enable debug mode across all of your containers at one point. The idea is that now you can go into your environment, go into variables, say debug mode equals true, and now when you restart your containers, all of your containers would have that debug mode variable set instead of you having to go to each of your containers individually, go into environment variables and changing it to the environment scope. We might have to come up with a new name for that, because now as I'm saying environment variables, and also
I was just thinking of the impact that's going to have on documentation. That's what always hits my brain first. I'm like, if we name it environment variables and environment variables already exist, how will I name these files?
We'll have to name it like environment scoped variables or something. I don't know, because like I don't know what we'd name it, because I don't want
to put your favorites in the comments.
yeah, thank you. But I don't.
That's actually a great idea. Yeah. If there's enough comments for one specific direction and it's not crazy, like I don't know what a bad idea. But, like the internet is pretty good at coming up with weird stuff.
It always wins.
Yeah. We'll end up having variables named the variable like that ship that was they ran the contest for in the UK a few years ago. It ended up with the name of Bodie McBoatface.
Wow, original.
Yeah, but yeah, we can't call it environment secrets, because not every variable in there will necessarily be a secret either. So that could be confusing on its own, right? I think this is actually one of the hardest parts of being a developer, is naming things.
Cascading environment variables.
I don't know. Well, yeah, comments.
It's not a bad one. Little,
thanks.
CSS kind of play there.
You see that? Good. Well,
and you can overwrite that, and we can put important on the one. That's the extent of my CSS now.
And you're done.
That's it. I'm out.
I wrote that line this morning.
Did you? Important?
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. It had to be done.
It did. It's the first thing I do. That's why they don't let me open the CSS files.
But okay, so let's jump back to BDG. We've talked about some new features, but talking more about your company. So I'm guessing, well, straight up, I've never asked this question, but I'm guessing BDG is just your initials.
Super original, it is. My middle initial is D. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, super. Well, it's kind of funny. So my brother and my sister all have B's, so we were all BG. So we all that's how we kind of identified ourselves when we did things, was we had our middle initial and stuff.
Really?
Brianne, Brandon, and Brett. Yeah. Thanks, Mom and Dad. So it was just how we kind of did that.
Got it. Yeah. So
I bought my domain name, I think, in 2003 when I was in college still.
Good play.
Had it for a long time.
Yeah.
Yep.
No. So with the projects that you're working on, and being a dev shop on cycle, so I guess, how do I want to word this question? Being a dev shop that is managing multiple projects at the same time, how has that experience been from a cycle perspective of, I don't want to speak for you, so I'll stop there. But
the first thing that comes to mind is the hubs, and be able to change those hubs real quick to go back and forth to those projects. That's made it so much easier. There's other platforms where you can switch between, not necessarily platforms like yours, but other things that you can try to switch between accounts or between. It's a nightmare. You guys is like boop boop done. So yeah, that's what comes to mind first.
And do you have any clients that are using? We support Equinix Metal, we support Vultr, and we support AWS. are all of your projects on one provider,
Or
or
they're all on Equinox, yeah.
okay, they're all on Equinox. All right. And so that's one of the as you're talking about jumping between hubs, the first thing that kind of jumped into my mind was just the ability of standardization. The fact that you could have stuff sitting at AWS. If you had a client that was like, hey, I really want to use AWS for this. And from your perspective using Cycle and from your developer's perspective, it wouldn't matter, right? Because we've standardized in the underlying infrastructure so much that it gives your customers full choice.
Yep.
So I mean, it's just
technically one of the projects that we're working on together that we won't talk about yet because it's in the works, but will be built for AWS, but you won't have to change anything in your development process. So that's pretty cool, right? So at the end of the day, it's just basically the same dev process, and because of the containers and the way Cycle works, it really doesn't matter where it ends up.
Nope. I love that.
But it's specifically scoped to AWS because of one of the contracts that they have on their end. So that customer is stuck with it. I don't want to say stuck with, but is using AWS.
Yeah.
Sorry, AWS.
But no, so, I mean, it just needs to be able to dive into all that, and so I guess as we begin to wrap up this episode of the podcast, is there anything that, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot right now, but is there anything that you've seen or is there anything that as you've been using Cycle that you've been like, I really wish the platform did X, or on the opposite is where something is like, I didn't know I needed X, and you found that the platform had it.
Yeah, so the first answer is pipelines, which now that it's out, it's been, I was like, because I remember asking you, like, why do I have to go through all these steps? You're like, it's just the way it works. And I'm not a big fan of it. We've always done it that way, or it's just the way it works. Like, that's kind of, I don't like that mentality.
Yeah.
So then now that you guys have pipelines out, I'm excited to really leverage that. And then I think to answer your second question is really the ability to re-image, to go backwards in time if you need to, for whatever reason. We've done it a handful of times where we push something out, for some reason a bug gets caught or whatever, and now we go, okay, we know this one was stable, let's go back to this, and then go back to the dev side of things. So yeah.
And that's something that we kind of accidentally implemented, right?
Re-image?
Yeah, no, well, not the ability to re-image, but like the ability to go back in time, because a lot of people who are using Docker, they'll just use like the latest tag, and if they push a new version, the latest, and then they pull that latest in, they can't go back.
Right? That's why we originally had the you have to do it all the way over again thing, because each image on Cycle was that atomic snapshot, kind of point in time.
Yep.
That's the words I was looking for, point in time.
Snapshot's a good one too, though.
There we go. We're working them all in. But that, and then that's what facilitated this whole, I can re-image this, and then I can look at this list, and I can look at the timestamp if I don't know the name, or if I'm a developer that wasn't the one that built it, but I know like when it worked last. I can kind of pick and be able to get back to that working state. So that's cool that you had that experience.
Yep.
And now with image sources, we have both, plus the addition of pipelines to kind of tie it all together.
Yeah, the image source and being able to pull from that real quick when saving that token was super time saver too.
Yeah, we did. That was a big change we made back in, I think, was that February or March?
How was I say about,
where we made it so that you no longer have to put in your auth credentials every time you want to pull an image again.
You store it as an image source, and poof, done.
Yep, and that was a big change to implement. And we decided to do that in 3 days.
Well, I should almost get up and let Grady sit down and talk about implementing image sources twice in 3 days, because he had to implement it into the current build plus what he was working on, plus we were doing like weeks of, because we had to do a pretty intense QA for that.
We did.
I mean, obviously with a change so dynamic as moving images to one thing and in creating a whole new image sources, we had to make sure that it was going to be perfect and work every time. So that was, I will again give Grady in the back row there props on image sources. That was an incredible 2 weeks. That was an incredible couple weeks, and it was really, really fun to see and work through.
It was.
And then it's always good to hear, obviously, if the end user is getting something out of it.
It's worked every time.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right, there's only so many hours in the day, and the tools you use are supposed to save you time.
Yep.
And I probably say this all too often, and it'll, kind of sounds like just beating our own drum here, but it shouldn't require a specialist to implement an abstraction, right? So you buy this tool that's supposed to abstract something away, and then all of a sudden you have to hire someone just to use the tool, as opposed to just being able to do it. So
I think that's now episode 3 with that.
probably the third time. I say it all
You need
the
a
time.
shirt with it, man.
I should. I'll get
We have
one.
like 4 shirt ideas today.
We do, man.
Can I?
Let's shut this down. Let's start a shirt company.
I have a press up in Tahoe. I have a press in my friend's garage.
That
It's
is
just-
very.
It's just sitting there. So if we want to make shirts, let us know in the
We know
comments
a guy. Yeah.
what we should put
know a guy.
on each shirt, and that's probably a cue that we are at time because we're talking about t-shirts.
Yeah, we're
now.
talking about t-shirts now. So, yeah, I mean, unless you have anything else to add, it's been great having you on the podcast.
Oh, how do people find you on the internet?
We have really killer search engine optimization on our website. Feel free to type in any keywords you want to come find us. No, a lot of it's a good question.
I deserve
most
that.
people that are dev shops in town don't do what we do. They typically roll things out on WordPress pretty quickly and come up with, they stack all their solutions on top of a WordPress platform. Where we don't. We like to find out what the problem is, then build the right solution. So. To answer your question, not a lot of people do what we do, so we like the hard stuff. Bring us the stuff that's real difficult. Bring us the stuff that we have to get in the nitty-gritty of your business and understand the flow, so we can come up with a custom solution for you.
And if someone wanted to find you via a
BDGwebdesign.com.
Are you on Instagram? Any social? Anything else you want to plug?
Nope, just the website's good.
Right on.
I have social channels, but we're all dev shop, so a whole lot more.
You keep it lean and mean.
That's right. I get all my publicity through Cycle.
I mean, we do. We promote the dev shops that just do really incredible work. We try to promote, especially when projects come in and they need to be completed. Our team is so focused on platform and portal that it's impossible. And we have, you and a couple other shops that just really push projects through really quickly. It's been so fun because we've actually been working on a project that I keep alluding to, and maybe someday we'll have you back and we can talk about it.
With everybody.
And it's always been super interesting to see how different dev shops approach projects. And I don't know how much of your process I can expose to people, but the amount of time that you've spent up front just really finding out like what is the thing you're trying to solve and what are all the different ways that can look in like day to day around the office and things like that.
Yeah, so I think it's a good point. I think that's one of the advantages I have personally is my degree is a business degree. It's not a computer science degree.
Yeah.
So in my experience at the hospital too, it was all about workflows and understanding how the end user is going to use it and all that stuff. So I got to bring all this experience and knowledge together to really understand the business process. And then I know the technology side too, and what do we apply to this to create something that's really going to make a difference in your day-to-day operations. So yeah, so a lot of time up front, understanding the user roles, what the user roles are doing, what's the functionality behind it, what are the edge cases. I try to talk to all the user roles. What are you spending a lot of time on? Is there something we can automate? Is there something we could put a front-end validation on to save you on the back end? Some of these other things that, things evolve over time, and they always change, but if you put that time in up front, you're going to have a really good understanding of what the project should do at the end.
Yeah. And then by the time you get to launch, you have this product that's, we'll say semi-complete because like you said, things are always flexible and they're going to change when you get feedback from the users. And then hopefully Cycle provides you that, super easy way to update that app.
Yep.
So that it's just really, like you said, easy to sync up with your release on the mobile, if you're deploying a back end or if it's just a web application.
Yep.
So can't wait to.
Super easy.
I like that. I just take so much pride in the fact that we allow people to not have to care about a whole bunch of other stuff. Like just being able to. I mean, just hearing you talk about that process, like it's nice. I mean, it's exciting. It shows that you really care about your clients and what you're working on, and you take pride in that. And it's nice to just be able to play a part in that process of saying, well, you're so focused on those things. you shouldn't have to worry about managing your infrastructure and things. So
Right.
it's just it's one of those things that to be able to take pride in, of being able to help other people do what they do better.
You guys
enjoy
definitely do that.
Excellent. Thank you. And so BDG, webdesign.com. Without the us.
If you type that in, that will not work. Although it might search. That could potentially.
I'll go buy that domain and forward it real quick.
Can you get that still?
Sure, I'm gonna do that.
BDG, webdesign.com.
That's kind of like, Google bought, I don't know, every iteration of Google, the word.
All the different O's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I thought that I could potentially buy like a malformed Google domain, and I was like, oh my God, I'm a genius. And
It's brilliant.
And then I went to
Taken.
Google to
Taken.
search for like
Taken. Yep.
GoDaddy or something, which is ironic in itself. Anyways, thank you all so much for joining us this week. Thank you so much for sitting in.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Really appreciate you coming in and joining us. If you are having fun, leave us a comment or a like, or wherever you found us, leave some kind of interaction. We love to hear from the people that are listening to this podcast, and we hope that you're getting a lot of value out of it. If there's any awesome suggestions of stuff that you'd love to hear about, definitely leave that in the comments as well. But I think for this week, that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.